welcome everybody to today's CESI Insight series. Today we are with Agnes Jongerius, member of the European Parliament and member of the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. There she is the coordinator for the S&D group, which has a new name, but which I forgot at this very moment. But I think what is very important for me also to highlight that Agnes is the former chairwoman of the FNV in the Netherlands, and also what I came across, that you have been the most influential woman in 2008 and 2009 in the Netherlands. So welcome,
Thank you.
Agnes.
Thank
Quite
you.
impressive. I think I'm not even in my own family the most influential person, so I'm very deeply impressed.
Thank you.
Agnes, how we just we have had many of these series now. We have had a couple of interviews also with the MEPs. The first question is always, how do you experience the Corona crisis privately, but also in your daily work? I mean, it is certainly not always easy, both in terms of organization of work, but also in terms of the dossiers one has to deal with.
Yeah, now privately, luckily I'm healthy, working from home for quite a long time, since mid-March, and that of course takes all kind of adjustment just to get a grip of what's happening in the world. I noticed myself that in the first few weeks I try to follow everything in the news, newspapers, TV, and at a certain moment you just get sick of it, and I thought, okay, this has been nice for a little period, being not always on the road, but from home. But now it's, so let's say after 4 or 5 weeks, it became clear that this situation is going to stay for, who knows, months, perhaps years on a row. So this is one thing. I must say, I personally miss my colleagues a lot, miss just the funny parts of drinking coffee together, or exchanging nitty-gritty details of the personal life, but also I think it's much easier to be creative when you're meeting in person instead of only via your iPad, because there is it's two-dimensional. It's not three-dimensional, and it's on the one hand efficient. Meetings became shorter, but they are not as creative as before. And so this is on a personal basis. I must say, on a professional basis, I'm really worried about what's going to happen. Now it's much more clear that this crisis is leading to an economic and social crisis, which will not be, everyone hoped this would be a sharp V, so in and then hop out again. You see, of course, complete sectors in big problems. You see much clearer now that all those people who first thought it's nice to be on a flexible contract now are without protection. It's clear that the way we treat seasonal workers is a bloody shame. So it's much clearer now how big the problems are on every part of the continent. I must say, and I must say, I worry a lot about. Okay, it's clear that no one wants to go back to business as usual. But what does the future hold for plans for us and for future generations? It's really, I worry a lot, I must say.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we're all worried, and I mean, we have been quite positive, to be honest, on the proposal now from the European Commission of 10 days ago. When was it? Because it's also a lot, not only about the money or the support, but it's also, I think, which is, I think we need a psychological help now also at this moment, all of us. And I think these measures like these are always important, not only in a fiscal sense, but also in a psychological sense. But you as an MEP, what are your dossiers now, which are particularly close?
Of course, at first it was like trying to be busy with proposals as the SURE, so the temporary unemployment reinsurance scheme. Also busy at this moment with the occupational health and safety risks, which are at hand at this moment. And of course, there are big differences for the risk for people working from home. So I think we're going to talk about teleworking and the right to disconnect, but it's also clear that those workers in the front line, especially those people in the medical sector, are also suffering quite a lot of occupational risk at this moment. Also clear for instance, the seasonal workers. I think there has been an outcry for in the Netherlands and Germany and other member states where in the meat sector, 20-25% of the people working there falling ill with COVID-19. So this whole, the occupational health and safety risk, new risk, old risk, the risk of the spreading of the pandemic, but also are people properly protected? So the whole issue of personal protection gears had been on our plate. While on the other hand, we are quite busy in pushing for, when we're talking about recovery, and we are looking for how to deal with the crisis, which is the result of this health crisis. How do we prevent making the same mistakes as before? So going to austerity politics, going to push for the public sector to pay, while it's on the other hand clear that we need a strong public health and public sector to get people going. But it's also clear that a lot of those people we now call essential workers or frontline workers or working in vital sectors are more often than not people with unsecure labor contracts, with 0 hours contracts, with flexible contracts, and in some cases also without protection. For instance, though those workers for the platforms or those cross-border workers who are not able to use the system of one member state, but also not of the other member states. So it's now important for us that we push for not the old recipes from the banking crisis, but also it's not enough to applaud those people in the front line. It's payback time. So people deserve better working conditions, better pay and better contracts. So it's important to have the right priorities when we are going to talk about recovery and what kind of new economy we want. Next to that, it's also important to go on with the proposals which has already been made before. So, for instance, the proposals around minimum wage, just today, the Commission launched the second stage consultation on its proposal for a European-wide system of minimum wages. But a new proposal is, I think, getting more urgency, is the proposal around the youth unemployment. We were coming from a situation where in most member states the unemployment was decreasing quite rapidly. And now again, you see that a lot of young people, more often than not, starting their career in flexible contracts, losing their jobs in this economic crisis. So it's super, super important to see if we can bring at the table again new initiatives for fighting youth unemployment.
You have, do you have any, because I mean, nobody can clearly see or say it, but do you have any feeling or impressions of how this, the short and long-term impacts of Corona on our ways of work and our working conditions maybe? You mentioned earlier, I mean, we are now in a standby models, we have adapted. How will this continue? What is your premonition on that?
I think we in one sense made a quite of a quantum leap in the new whole digital society, and it's clear that perhaps the old offices, everyone has to be there from 9 to 5. That kind of situation is going to change. I think business trips are going to be less than before, but it's also so I think our working methods will change. Even at the European Parliament, we can now vote from home. So if that's possible, things can. Sorry, I have to take some water. Excuse me.
Oh, but what you were saying also, when it comes to the most vulnerables in this crisis, we are very, very worried. We just had the CESI at noon event on how to ensure a seamless social protection, but of course this is only part of it, and a lot will depend on how fast we can recover. And it's just to come back to what you said earlier. Can we afford strong, as an example, we represent a lot of public sector workforce. Can we afford, we must afford strong public services also in the future, but the debates, the societal debates will come together with new austerity measures, probably at a certain point. I mean, cap has to be made. And then these are very difficult societal debates also, which we will have to lead. But sorry, please go ahead.
So I think our working methods will change. So I think, and this is also of course a problem, because I'm here at home. I have a separate room where I can work. I have no little children running around. And I have pretty good internet. But if you are a single mom or don't have the availability of good internet, or you're not knowing your way around with all these new digital tools, I think this is quite a big problem. So I think we will run the risk of, let's say, a new divide in society, those who can go along with this new digital transition, and those will have problems dealing with that. But I think it's also clear that this new working methods it deserves our attention. So we are now thinking about, shouldn't we have a directive on teleworking? Shouldn't we have a directive on the right to disconnect? Because if my home is also my workplace, when does the work start and when does it end? And you hear quite a lot of new evidence of mental problems at the workplace. So I think this will be a new area for our attention. It's also clear that we cannot go on to have whole groups in our society who are without protection. So the whole idea that the fixed term labor contract was something of the past. A few older generations were still clinging to this old fixed term contracts, while the new society, the new labor market model was flexibility to the max. It's clear that that doesn't satisfy people, and it's also leading to a lot of societal risk, because you now see the big difference between those people who still got a monthly income and those who are on the group of people who are getting their money paid by the government in this kind of temporary unemployment schemes, but also the people who were self-employed and have no income at all. So I think it's clear that we have to think about, is this a society we are proud of, or should we indeed talk again about solidarity, about social benefits, or indeed our welfare state? I think a lot of old debates will come back in new forms, and that's also interesting.
Mm-hmm. Just as you mentioned also that one of your key dossiers was the SURE dossiers also in the past. How do you altogether assess now the responses of the EU and the European institutions?
I must say, at first you saw that people were saying, what's Europe doing? But overall, I think the Commission took quite a lot of good initiatives, shorter measures, and also making proposals for the mid-term and the longer term. While it's clear that if it's on the whole field of health, the European Commission or the European institutions don't have a lot of a formal task, because the tasks are at the member states, but people are asking, why aren't we as Europe push for medicines, vaccines, personal equipment, etc. So I think some people were saying, what's Brussels doing? But these were on areas where until now people said Brussels should not mingle in our healthcare systems. If it's on the midterm, there are good proposals at the table. I do hope that the European Council are going to agree on these proposals quite quickly, because the crisis is now. People are unemployed now. People are without money now. So we cannot afford to have months and months of exhausting debates without helping people. We all know that the economic crisis and the social crisis will be big. And we have a responsibility to act now, I think.
Yeah, but altogether, I mean, I couldn't agree more. We sense the lines where disputes or where at least negotiations would be there, and we hope personally, as a side comment, we of course look above all at the Netherlands and Denmark, as it seems, in this question. But let's see what the European Summit brings. Agnes, final message to the CESI community or to the trade unions in this crazy moment.
Well, my final message would be, it's especially in a time as this where we cannot come together, it's super important that people are not alone. And I think just in uncertain times, let's find the strength in pulling our powers together. So I see a lot of trade unions in the different member states doing a great job in pushing for employment rights, for income, for support for their workers. So if someone is still doubting, is it time to join a union? The time is now. Join a
Agnes,
union.
thank you very much, and keep the spirit and stay healthy.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.